Jake stood over the silent form of the Ravager Prime, his hands still shaking from the electromagnetic feedback. The massive creature lay motionless on the spaceport landing field, its 40-foot frame looking somehow smaller in death. The armor that had turned aside every human weapon now seemed dull and lifeless, no longer shifting colors or adapting to threats. Lisa finished checking Jake's vital signs and stepped back with relief. Heart rate is elevated but stable. No permanent damage from the neural feedback. "How long was I connected to that thing?" Jake asked, rubbing his temples where a fierce headache was building. "About 3 minutes," Pete replied, shutting down his monitoring equipment. "But those were the longest 3 minutes of my life." Jake walked slowly around the creature's body, studying the monster that had terrorized human colonies for weeks. Up close, he could see the intricate details of its construction. Biological muscle tissue woven through mechanical frameworks, neural pathways that glowed faintly under translucent skin. Technology so advanced it seemed like magic. "The Zephyrians are going to be very unhappy about this," Lisa observed. "Let them come," Jake said. "We know how to beat their weapons now." The civilian volunteers who had helped with the operation were emerging from their hiding places, approaching the fallen creature with obvious caution. These were ordinary people, farmers and shopkeepers and teachers, who had risked their lives to help stop the monster. Jake felt a surge of pride watching them. "Is it really dead?" asked Maria Santos, a teacher who had volunteered to help with the evacuation scenario. She was holding the hand of a small boy who had been hiding in the emergency shelters. "It's at peace," Jake replied, thinking about the human voices he had heard in those final moments. The soldiers whose neural tissue had been used to build the creature had finally been freed from their mechanical prison. Pete was already examining the creature's technology with professional interest. "Jake, this is incredible. The level of integration between biological and mechanical systems is beyond anything we've ever seen. If we could study this, reverse engineer the technology—" "No," Jake said firmly. "We bury it, deep enough that no one will ever find it again." "But the scientific value?" "Pete, that thing was built using the brains of human soldiers, our people. They deserve to rest in peace, not be studied in a laboratory." Pete looked disappointed, but nodded. "You're right. Some knowledge isn't worth having." Jake's radio crackled to life. "This is General Wells aboard the UES Titan. Come in, ground team." Jake had been expecting this call. News of the Ravager Prime's destruction would have reached the evacuated fleet by now. He keyed his radio. "This is Lieutenant Morrison. The threat has been neutralized." "Morrison, what's your status? Are you injured?" "Minor injuries only. The creature is down permanently." There was a long pause before Wells responded. "How is that possible? Our intelligence indicated the target was invulnerable to conventional weapons." "It wasn't a conventional attack, General." "Explain." Jake looked at the fallen monster, thinking about how to describe what had happened. The creature had a psychological weakness. Its biological components contained human consciousness fragments that created internal conflicts. "We exploited those conflicts. You're telling me you defeated an unstoppable alien weapon with psychology?" "With humanity, General. The creature couldn't process human compassion and sacrifice. Those concepts were outside its programming parameters." Another pause. "We're sending down recovery teams. Don't let anyone approach the creature until our specialists arrive." "Negative, General. The creature will be buried here with full military honors. It contains the remains of human soldiers." "Morrison, that's not your decision to make." "With respect, General, it is. I'm the ranking officer on the ground, and these are my people. We take care of our own. Jake switched off his radio before Wells could respond. He knew he would face consequences for disobeying orders, but some things were more important than military protocol. Over the next several hours, Jake's team and the civilian volunteers worked together to prepare a burial site for the Ravager Prime. They chose a location in the Crystal Caverns where the creature would be protected from scavengers and treasure hunters. It seemed fitting that something so terrible and beautiful should rest among the natural beauty of the planet's formations. As they worked, Jake found himself thinking about Danny and all the other soldiers who had died fighting the creature. Their sacrifice hadn't been wasted. The knowledge gained from this battle would help humanity defend against future threats. "Jake," Lisa said, joining him as he watched the burial preparations. "Do you think there will be more of these things?" "Probably. The Zephyrians won't give up easily. And we'll be ready for them?" Jake nodded. "We'll be ready. We know their weakness now." Humanity? Humanity. The thing they can't understand is that we're stronger together than apart, that we'll sacrifice ourselves for others, even when it doesn't make tactical sense. That's something they can program into a weapon but never truly comprehend. Pete approached with a salvaged communication device. "Jake, I'm picking up Zephyrian military transmissions. Sounds like they're recalling their forces from this sector." "They're afraid," Jake realized. "They put everything they had into creating the perfect anti-human weapon, and a single human destroyed it with his bare hands." "You didn't destroy it with your bare hands," Lisa pointed out. "You used compassion, courage, and the help of good people." "Same thing," Jake said with a smile. The burial ceremony was simple but dignified. Jake spoke about the human soldiers, whose neural tissue had been used in the creature's construction, honoring their sacrifice and their final act of rebellion against their captors. The civilian volunteers shared stories about the friends and family they had lost to the creatures. Rampage. Even Pete, who usually avoided emotional displays, said a few words about the importance of remembering both victories and defeats. As the sun set over the Crystal Caverns, Jake found himself alone with the sealed tomb. The Ravager Prime lay buried, beneath tons of rock and crystal finally at rest. The human consciousness fragments that had been trapped inside were free at last. "Thank you," Jake whispered to the grave, "for showing me that even the worst monsters can be defeated if we remember what makes us human." A week later, the recovery fleet arrived from Earth. General Wells demanded a full investigation into Jake's actions, threatening court-martial proceedings for disobeying orders. But the civilian volunteers spoke up for him, telling anyone who would listen about how Lieutenant Jake Morrison had saved their lives and their planet. The investigation was quietly dropped when video footage of the final battle reached Earth. The images of a single human soldier defeating a 40-foot alien weapon with nothing but courage and compassion became legendary throughout human space. Jake found himself promoted to captain and assigned to a new unit specializing in alien threat assessment. But the real victory wasn't in the promotion or the recognition. It was in the knowledge that humanity had faced its greatest test and emerged stronger. The Zephyrians had tried to break human spirit by creating the perfect killing machine, but they had only succeeded in proving that human spirit was unbreakable. Years later, when other alien weapons threatened human colonies, the defenders would remember the story of the Ravager Prime. They would remember that no weapon was truly unstoppable, that every monster had a weakness, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from superior firepower, but from superior humanity. Jake never forgot the voices he had heard in those final moments. The human soldiers who had been trapped inside the creature's mind. Their sacrifice had made the victory possible, just as Danny's sacrifice had started Jake on the path to understanding the creature's weakness. Every human who had died fighting the monster had contributed to its eventual defeat. The beast had been built to tear armies apart, but it had been broken by something the Zephyrians could never understand or duplicate. It had been broken by the unbreakable human spirit, by compassion that transcended programming, by the simple truth that humans were strongest when they stood together against the darkness. In the end, that was all it took. Not superweapons or advanced technology, but the recognition that what made humans human was also what made them unconquerable. The Ravager Prime had learned that lesson in its final moments, and through its destruction, the galaxy had learned it too. Jake lay flat against the cold metal roof of the abandoned spaceport hangar, watching the Ravager Prime patrol the landing zones below. The creature had learned to anticipate human evacuation attempts and now positioned itself at strategic points to intercept fleeing civilians. Its intelligence was growing with each passing day, making it more dangerous than ever. "Neural disruptor is ready," Pete whispered through the comm system. He was hidden in the control tower with his modified equipment, waiting for Jake's signal. "But remember, you'll only have one shot at this." "Copy that," Jake replied. "Lisa, what's your position?" "Medical station is set up in Hangar 7, came Lisa's voice. "I've got the defibrillator ready, but Jake, if this goes wrong, I might not be able to reach you in time." Jake understood the risks. The neural disruptor would create a massive electromagnetic pulse when activated. If he was too close to the device when it triggered, the feedback could kill him. But it was the only way to get close enough to the creature's neural interface. "Resistance teams, report status," Jake called. "Team Alpha in position at the north gate," came the first reply. "Team Beta ready at the emergency shelters," said another voice. "Team Charlie standing by with the civilians." Jake had spent days convincing the remaining resistance fighters to help with his plan. Most of them thought he was crazy, but they were desperate enough to try anything. The staged evacuation would require perfect coordination between all teams. "Remember, the goal isn't to fight the creature," Jake reminded them. "We need to create a scenario that triggers its psychological conflicts. When it hesitates, that's when I make my move." The plan relied on Jake's observation that the Ravager Prime became confused when faced with human acts of compassion and sacrifice. The creature's programming could handle military tactics, but it struggled to process civilian behavior that didn't fit combat parameters. "Beginning Stage 1, Jake announced. Team Alpha triggered emergency flares at the north gate, creating the illusion of an evacuation attempt. The Ravager Prime immediately responded, moving toward the flares with predatory speed. Its massive footsteps shook the ground as it crossed the landing field. "Stage 2, Jake called. Team Beta activated recorded distress calls from the emergency shelters, broadcasting pleas for help and rescue coordinates." The creature's head turned toward the new sound source, its 6 eyes glowing brighter as it processed the multiple threats. "It's working," Pete observed. "The creature's neural activity is increasing. It's trying to prioritize targets." Jake began moving across the hangar rooftops, staying low to avoid detection. The neural disruptor was strapped to his back, its weight making every movement more difficult. Below him, the Ravager Prime stalked between the buildings, searching for the source of the signals. "Stage 3, Jake whispered. Team Charlie emerged from hiding with a group of civilian volunteers. These were people who had refused evacuation, choosing to stay and help with Jake's desperate plan. They moved slowly across the open ground, carrying wounded civilians and supporting elderly survivors. The Ravager Prime saw them immediately. The creature turned toward the group with obvious hunger, but then something strange happened. Instead of charging forward to attack, the monster slowed its approach. Its movements became more cautious, almost uncertain. "Look at those neural readings," Pete said excitedly. "The creature is experiencing massive internal conflict." Jake could see why. The civilian group wasn't behaving like military targets. They weren't running or fighting. Instead, they were helping each other, sharing resources, protecting the weak. A young man was carrying an injured woman on his back. An elderly woman was sharing her water with crying children. A wounded soldier was using his body to shield civilians from the creature's line of sight. The Ravager Prime stopped completely, its massive head tilting as it studied the group. For the first time since Jake had been observing it, the creature seemed genuinely confused. Its armor plates shifted rapidly through different colors as its systems tried to process what it was seeing. "The human neural tissue is fighting the programming," Pete explained. "Part of the creature recognizes these behaviors as noble and protective, but its combat programming says they're targets to be eliminated." Jake dropped down from the roof onto the creature's back. The Ravager Prime was so focused on the psychological conflict that it didn't notice his approach. Jake began climbing toward the neural interface at the base of the creature's skull, his hands finding purchase on the gaps between armor plates. The creature's skin was warm and slightly organic, pulsing with internal energy. Jake could feel the vibrations of massive internal machinery, the steady rhythm of artificial hearts pumping synthetic blood through biological veins. It was like climbing a living machine. "Hurry, Jake," Lisa called through the comm. "The creature's vital signs are fluctuating wildly." Jake reached the neck area where Pete had identified the neural interface. The armor here was thicker, designed to protect the creature's most vulnerable systems. But Jake could see the connection points where biological neural pathways linked to mechanical control systems. "Pete, I'm in position. Are you ready?" "Neural disruptor is charged and ready. But Jake, the electromagnetic pulse will be massive. You need to get clear before I activate it." "Negative. I need to make physical contact with the interface for this to work." Jake pulled out his combat knife and began working at the armor plating around the neural interface. The material was incredibly tough, designed to withstand military-grade weapons. But Jake's knife found a seam between plates and began to work it open. Below him, the Ravager Prime was still frozen in place, watching the civilian group with obvious confusion. The creature's internal struggle was becoming more intense, its systems overheating from the conflicting demands of its programming. "Jake, the creature's moving," Lisa warned. The Ravager Prime had finally resolved its internal conflict in favor of its combat programming. The monster raised its massive claws toward the civilian group, preparing to end their lives with mechanical efficiency. "Now, Pete! Activate the disruptor now!" Jake pressed the neural disruptor against the exposed interface, just as Pete triggered the device. Electricity arced through the creature's nervous system, amplifying the human consciousness fragments that the Zephyrians had tried to suppress. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The Ravager Prime's attack stopped mid-motion as competing impulses warred within its mind. Jake felt the creature's muscles spasm as different neural pathways fought for control of its body. "The human consciousness is taking over," Pete shouted. "But the creature's systems are overloading. The whole thing might shut down permanently." Jake held on as the Ravager Prime thrashed wildly, its body caught between human compassion and alien programming. The creature's roar changed pitch, becoming almost plaintive, like a cry for help rather than a threat. "There are human voices in the neural interface," Lisa reported, monitoring the creature's brain activity. "Multiple consciousness fragments all trying to assert control," Jake realized. What was happening? The Zephyrians had used neural tissue from captured human soldiers to build the creature's brain. Those soldiers' personalities hadn't been completely erased. They were still there, trapped inside the monster's mind, forced to watch as their bodies were used to kill their own people. "Can you hear me?" Jake called out, pressing his hands against the neural interface. "If there's anyone human left in there, I'm trying to help you." The creature's movements became less violent. Its massive head turned toward Jake, and for a moment he saw something different in its eyes. Instead of alien hunger, there was recognition, understanding, pain. "Thank you," the creature whispered, its voice a mixture of mechanical tones and human words. "Please end this." Jake understood. The human consciousness fragments were asking him to destroy the creature, to free them from their mechanical prison. They would rather die than continue being used as weapons against their own species. "Pete, overload the neural interface," Jake ordered. "Give the human consciousness fragments full control." "That will kill the creature," Pete warned. "That's what they want." Jake maintained contact with the interface as Pete pushed the neural disruptor to maximum power. The Ravager Prime's body convulsed as human memories and emotions flooded through its systems. For the first time, the creature experienced compassion, love, sacrifice, and all the other emotions that made humans human. It was too much for the alien technology to handle. Systems began shutting down as the creature's mechanical components rejected the human consciousness they couldn't understand or control. "Jake, get clear!" Lisa shouted. "The whole thing is going to collapse!" But Jake didn't move. He stayed with the creature as its systems failed, providing what comfort he could to the human minds trapped inside. He felt their relief as they finally found peace, their gratitude for being freed from their mechanical prison. The Ravager Prime fell to its knees, then toppled forward onto the landing field. Its eyes dimmed from red to blue, then went dark completely. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy had been destroyed not by superior firepower, but by the power of human compassion. Jake slid down from the creature's neck, his body aching from the Jake crouched behind a pile of twisted metal that had once been a transport vehicle. Through his binoculars, he watched the Ravager Prime methodically tear apart the remains of Echo Station. The creature moved with horrible efficiency, its massive, claws peeling back armor plating like opening a can. Inside the station, Jake could see the bodies of soldiers who had made their last stand here. "Still think this was a good idea?" Pete whispered from beside him. The engineer's face was pale with fear, but his hands remained steady as he operated the scanning equipment. "Getting better data on its behavioral patterns," Jake replied, keeping his voice low. "Look at how it searches the wreckage." The Ravager Prime was examining each section of the destroyed station with careful attention. Its 6 red eyes glowed as internal scanners checked for survivors or useful technology. When it found a human body, the creature would pause and study it for several seconds before moving on. "It's learning anatomy," Lisa observed through her own binoculars. "Every corpse teaches it more about human physiology." Jake had been watching the monster for 3 days now, ever since General Wells and her forces had escaped the planet. The evacuation had been chaotic and incomplete, leaving behind thousands of civilians and several hundred soldiers who had refused to abandon their posts. Most of those people were dead now, killed by a creature that grew smarter and more dangerous with each encounter. Pete, what's the energy reading from its neural interface? Pete checked his instruments. Still showing massive activity in the biological components. But there's something strange about the pattern. Strange how? It's not just processing tactical information. There are neural patterns that look almost like memory formation, like it's trying to understand something about the humans it kills. Jake lowered his binoculars and looked at Pete. What kind of memories? I can't tell from this distance. We'd need to get much closer to the creature for detailed scans. That's what we're going to do. Lisa turned to stare at Jake. Please tell me you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. The evacuation transport that crashed yesterday. There were survivors, and the Ravager Prime is heading there next. We're going to follow it. That's suicide, Pete said flatly. Maybe, but we need to understand how this thing thinks. Every military engagement has been a disaster because we're fighting it like a normal weapon. But it's not normal. It's something else. Jake had been studying the stolen Zephyrian data files that Pete had recovered from a destroyed communications center. The information was fragmentary and heavily encrypted, but they had managed to decode enough to understand the basic design principles behind the Ravager Prime. The creature wasn't just a weapon, it was an experiment. The Zephyrians used human genetic material in its construction, Jake explained as they prepared to move to their next observation post. Neural tissue taken from captured soldiers. They wanted to create something that could think like a human in order to fight humans more effectively. But that means part of it is human, Lisa said slowly. Part of its mind comes from our people. Exactly. And that might be the weakness we're looking for. They made their way through the ruins of New Dallas Colony, moving carefully to avoid detection. The Ravager Prime's sensory systems were incredibly advanced, capable of detecting heat signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and even chemical traces left by human passage. Jake's team had learned to mask their presence using techniques borrowed from special operations units, but they all knew that if the creature decided to hunt them specifically, they wouldn't survive long. The crash site was located in a valley, between two hills, where a civilian transport had gone down during the evacuation. The ship had broken apart on impact, scattering debris across a wide area. Jake could see movement among the wreckage, indicating that some passengers had survived the crash. How many? He asked Lisa, who was using medical scanners to check for life signs. Maybe 15 people still alive. Most of them are badly injured. And the Ravager Prime? Pete checked his tracking equipment. 2 kilometers out and closing. It'll be here in 20 minutes. Jake made a decision that he knew might get them all killed. We're going to observe the creature's interaction with the survivors. I want to see how it behaves when faced with wounded, helpless humans. They positioned themselves on the ridge overlooking the crash site, using natural rock formations for cover. Jake set up recording equipment while Pete prepared his scanning devices. Lisa readied her medical kit, though Jake doubted they would be able to help any survivors after the Ravager Prime finished with them. The creature appeared at the mouth of the valley, moving with its characteristic predatory grace. Despite its massive size, the Ravager Prime could move almost silently when it chose to. Its armor plates shifted color to match the surrounding terrain, making it difficult to track even when they knew where to look. The survivors in the wreckage had heard it coming. Jake could see them trying to hide deeper in the ship's twisted hull, but there was nowhere to run. The Ravager Prime approached the crash site and began its examination. But something unexpected happened. Instead of immediately killing the survivors, the creature paused. its massive head tilted to one side as it studied a wounded woman who was trying to shield two small children with her body. The woman was clearly terrified, but she hadn't abandoned the children despite her own injuries. "Jake, are you seeing this?" Pete whispered. The Ravager Prime's behavior had changed. Its movements became less predatory and more curious. The creature extended one enormous claw toward the woman, but stopped short of touching her. For almost a full minute, the monster and the human stared at each other. Then the moment passed. The creature's eyes blazed brighter, and it killed the woman and children with surgical precision. But Jake had seen the hesitation, the moment of confusion in the monster's behavior. "It didn't understand what it was seeing," Lisa said quietly. "The woman protecting the children. That behavior doesn't match its programming. Because its programming is based on military encounters," Jake realized. "Combat situations where humans fight or flee. But this woman wasn't doing either. She was sacrificing herself for others." They watched as the Ravager Prime continued through the crash site, killing the remaining survivors. But the creature's efficiency had decreased. It paused several more, times when faced with acts of human compassion or sacrifice. Each time, its neural interface showed increased activity as it tried to process behaviors that didn't fit its tactical parameters. "The human neural tissue," Pete said suddenly. "It's creating conflicts with the programmed responses. The creature knows how to kill soldiers, but it doesn't know how to process civilian behavior." Jake felt a spark of hope for the first time since Danny's death. "Can we amplify that effect? Make the conflict worse?" "Theoretically, yes. If we could get close enough to its neural interface, we might be able to use a modified neural disruptor to enhance the human consciousness fragments." "How close?" Pete looked uncomfortable. "Physical contact. You'd need to actually touch the interface. Through 40 feet of armor and claws. I might be able to modify the disruptor to work through the armor, but it would require precise placement and perfect timing." Jake was already planning the operation in his mind. "We need to create a situation where the creature experiences maximum psychological conflict. Force it to confront human behavior that its programming can't handle." "You're talking about using innocent people as bait," Lisa said. "I'm talking about using the creature's own design against it. The Zephyrians thought they were being clever by incorporating human neural tissue, but they didn't understand what makes humans human." Over the next 2 days, Jake's team prepared for what might be their final mission. Pete worked on modifying a neural disruptor device, using components salvaged from destroyed military equipment. Lisa studied the creature's anatomy, looking for the best approach to the neural interface. Jake coordinated with the few remaining human resistance fighters, planning an operation that would require perfect timing and incredible courage. The plan was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. They would stage a fake evacuation, scenario designed to trigger the creature's psychological conflicts. When the Ravager Prime was distracted by its internal struggle, Jake would approach from behind and attempt to attach the neural disruptor to its interface. "This is insane," Pete said as he made final adjustments to the device. "Even if everything goes perfectly, you'll be within arm's reach of the most dangerous creature in the galaxy." Danny got close enough to blow himself up trying to scratch. "It's paint," Jake replied. "I'm going to get close enough to shut it down permanently." "And if the neural disruptor doesn't work?" Jake checked his sidearm and emergency equipment. "Then I'll try something else." "Like what?" "I'll think of something." Lisa finished reviewing the medical data on the creature's neural interface. "Jake, even if you succeed, the procedure might kill you. The electromagnetic feedback from the disruptor could stop your heart." Then make sure you're ready with the defibrillator. Jake looked at his small team. 2 people who had chosen to stay and fight when the smart thing would have been to run. They believed in him. Jake sat in the command bunker deep underground, staring at the reports coming in from across the planet. 3 more human settlements had fallen to the Ravager Prime in the past week. The creature moved from target to target with mechanical precision, leaving nothing but death and destruction behind. Each attack was more efficient than the last, as if the monster was learning from every battle. General Patricia Wells stood at the main display screen, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face showed the strain of commanding a losing war. Around the bunker, tired officers moved between computer stations, trying to coordinate evacuations and rescue missions that always seemed to arrive too late. "The evacuation ships will be here in 6 hours," General Wells announced to the room. "We're pulling all remaining personnel off this rock." Jake looked up from his tablet. "What about the civilians in the outer settlements? There are still thousands of people who haven't been evacuated." "They'll have to make their own way to the extraction points," Wells replied without looking at him. "We can't risk any more ships or personnel." "So we just abandon them?" General Wells turned to face Jake, her eyes hard. "Lieutenant Morrison, this planet is lost. That thing out there has destroyed everything we've thrown at it. Our job now is to save who we can and regroup somewhere else." Jake stood up, his hands clenched into fists. "My job is to protect people, not run away when things get difficult." "Your job is to follow orders," Wells snapped. "The Ravager Prime is unstoppable. We've hit it with everything from nuclear missiles to antimatter charges. Nothing works. It adapts to every weapon we use against it. Then we find another way. There is no other way. Report to the transport bay in 4 hours." "That's an order." Jake saluted and left the bunker, but he had no intention of following that order. Danny had died believing they could make a difference. Jake wasn't going to dishonor that sacrifice by running away. He made his way through the underground tunnels to the medical bay where Lisa Rodriguez was treating wounded soldiers. "How are they doing?" Jake asked, looking at the rows of beds filled with injured people. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Better than expected, considering what they went through. That thing's claws do some kind of energy damage that makes wounds harder to heal." "Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." She stopped, bandaging a soldier's arm, and looked at him. "You're not getting on that evacuation ship, are you?" The general's giving up. "She's abandoning thousands of people to save her own career." "Jake, maybe she's right. Maybe this fight can't be won." Jake shook his head. "There has to be something we can do. That creature isn't magic. It's a weapon, and every weapon has a weakness." Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "What do you need?" "Medical analysis of the creature's biology. Every scan we've taken, every bit of data we've collected. And I need Pete Sullivan to help with the technical side." "You're talking about going AWOL." "I'm talking about finishing what Danny started." Lisa looked around the medical bay at all the wounded soldiers. Many of them were young, barely out of training. They had trusted their leaders to protect them, and those leaders were preparing to run away. "Give me an hour to stabilize the critical patients," she said. "Then I'm with you." Jake found Pete Sullivan in the engineering section working on a damaged communications array. Pete was thin and nervous, with hands that were always moving, either fixing something or fidgeting with tools. He looked up when Jake approached, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Let me guess," Pete said. "You want me to help you do something stupid and dangerous that will probably get us all killed." How did you know? Because you've got that look. The same look Danny had before he blew himself up. Jake pulled up a chair and sat down next to Pete's workbench. Pete, you've been analyzing that creature's energy signatures for weeks. What have you learned? Pete set down his tools and pulled up data files on his computer screen. It's not just one system. The Ravager Prime is a combination of organic and mechanical components working together. The biological parts handle adaptation and learning, while the mechanical parts provide structure and weapons. What about weaknesses? That's the problem. The thing was designed specifically to counter human military tactics. Its armor adapts to kinetic impacts, energy weapons, even radiation. Its nervous system processes information faster than our computers. Jake studied the technical readouts on Pete's screen. The creature's internal structure was incredibly complex, with multiple redundant systems and self-repair mechanisms. But something about the neural interface caught his attention. What's this section here? Jake pointed to a cluster of connections at the base of the creature's skull. That's where the biological brain connects to the mechanical control systems. It's like a translator that lets the organic mind control the artificial body. And if that connection was disrupted, Pete's eyes widened as he understood what Jake was thinking. The creature would lose coordination between its biological and mechanical components. But Jake, that interface is buried under layers of armor. You'd need a surgical laser to even reach it. Or you'd need to get close enough to tear the armor. Away by hand. That's suicide. Maybe. But it's the first real weakness we've found. Over the next few hours, Jake, Lisa, and Pete gathered supplies and data files. They avoided the main sections of the base where General Wells and her staff were preparing for evacuation. Instead, they used maintenance tunnels and storage areas to move equipment to a hidden exit point. As they worked, reports continued to come in about the Ravager Prime's attacks. The creature had developed new tactics, using the environment to its advantage. It would cause avalanches to block escape routes or collapse buildings to trap people inside. The monster was becoming more creative in its methods of killing. It's learning human psychology, Lisa observed as she read through the latest reports. It's not just destroying military targets anymore, it's terrorizing the civilian population. The Zephyrians built it to break our will to fight, Jake said. They want us to surrender without resistance. It's working, Pete muttered. Half our forces have already been evacuated. Jake checked his watch. The evacuation ships would arrive in 2 hours. Soon, General Wells and her remaining forces would be gone, leaving the planet defenseless. This was their last chance to act. Let's move, Jake said. They made their way through the crystal caverns that honeycombed the planet's crust. These natural formations had protected human settlers from the harsh environment for decades. Now they would serve as Jake's base of operations for his war against the Ravager Prime. The caverns were beautiful in their own way, with walls of purple and blue crystal that caught and reflected light in strange patterns. But Jake had no time to appreciate the scenery. He was thinking about Danny, about all the soldiers who had died trying to stop the creature, about the thousands of civilians who would die if he failed. Jake, Lisa said as they set up their equipment in a large chamber, deep in the caverns. Even if we find a way to stop this thing, what then? The Zephyrians will just build another one. Then we'll stop that one too, Jake replied. And the next one after that. Pete looked up from his computer where he was analyzing the creature's movement patterns. The Ravager Prime has just destroyed the main spaceport. It's cutting off the last evacuation route. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. General Wells and her forces were trapped. The creature had outmaneuvered them, just as it had outmaneuvered every other human force on the planet. "How long before it reaches the command bunker?" Jake asked. "At its current speed, maybe 6 hours. 6 hours to find a way to stop an unstoppable killing machine. 6 hours to save thousands of lives. 6 hours to prove that Danny's sacrifice had meant something." Jake looked at his small team. Lisa was checking medical supplies with steady hands, despite the fear he could see in her eyes. Pete was running calculations and building models on his computer, his nervous energy focused into productive work. These two people had chosen to stay and fight when they could have run to safety. "All right," Jake said. "Let's figure out how to kill this thing." The ground shook like thunder as Jake Morrison pressed his back against the concrete wall. Dust fell from the ceiling of the abandoned warehouse where his squad had taken shelter. Through the broken windows, he could see the massive shape moving between the buildings. The Ravager Prime stood 40 feet tall, its metal and flesh body gleaming under the alien sun of Kepler 442b. Jake watched in horror as the creature's 6 red eyes scanned the ruins of New Dallas Colony. "Sir, we need to move now," whispered Danny Carter, Jake's childhood friend who had followed him into the war. Danny's face was covered in dirt and sweat. His hands shook as he gripped his plasma rifle. "The civilians are still trapped in the shelter 3 blocks north." Jake nodded, but kept watching the monster outside. The Ravager Prime had been unleashed by the Zephyrian Empire just 2 days ago. In those 2 days, it had destroyed 3 human military bases and killed thousands of soldiers. The creature was built for one purpose: to end human resistance on this planet. Its body was a mix of alien technology and biological parts taken from the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had created the perfect killing machine. The beast turned its massive head toward their hiding spot. Jake held his breath. The creature's armor plates shifted and changed color, adapting to match the gray concrete around it. Its claws, each one longer than a human arm, scraped against the ground as it moved. The sound made Jake's teeth hurt. "Contact all units," Jake whispered into his radio. "Civilian evacuation is the priority. Do not engage the target directly." The radio crackled with panicked voices. "Echo base is gone, sir. The thing tore through our defenses like paper." "Bravo team is down. Repeat, Bravo team is down. We need immediate extraction at grid 77. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He was just a lieutenant, but with most of the command structure. Dead or missing, he had become the ranking officer for this sector. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical thing. These people were counting on him to get them out alive. "Lisa, what's the status on the med station?" he asked into his radio. "We've got 40 wounded civilians and no way to move them," came the reply from Lisa Rodriguez, their field medic. Her voice was steady despite the chaos around them. "Some of these people won't survive transport," Jake cursed under his breath. The Ravager Prime had cornered them perfectly. The evacuation shuttles were on the other side of the colony, and the only route there led directly through the creature's hunting ground. They were trapped between saving the people they could move and abandoning those who couldn't be moved. "Sir," Danny said, pointing out the window, "look at that thing. It's not just killing randomly, it's thinking." Jake followed Danny's gaze. The Ravager Prime was systematically destroying the colony's infrastructure. It had taken out the power grid first, then the communication towers, and now it was working on the transportation hubs. This wasn't mindless destruction. The creature was cutting off all escape routes before closing in for the kill. "Pete, you reading this?" Jake called to their engineer Pete Sullivan, who was monitoring the creature's energy signatures from a hidden position. "Copy that, Lieutenant. The thing's putting out massive electromagnetic interference. It's jamming our equipment on purpose. This isn't just a weapon. It's a tactical genius wrapped in 40 feet of armor and claws." The Ravager Prime suddenly stopped moving. Its head turned directly toward their warehouse. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Could it sense them somehow? The creature's eyes began to glow brighter, and Jake realized with growing horror that it was scanning the building with some kind of advanced detection system. "Move! Move! Move!" Jake shouted. His squad burst from their cover just as the Ravager Prime's massive fist punched through the warehouse wall. Concrete and metal exploded in all directions. Jake felt a chunk of debris slice across his cheek as he ran. Behind them, the creature's roar shook the air like a physical force. They sprinted through the streets of the ruined colony. Abandoned vehicles and debris blocked their path, forcing them to climb over or around obstacles while the monster pursued them. Jake could hear its footsteps, each one hitting the ground like a bomb going off. "The shelter!" Danny pointed ahead, to a reinforced building where civilians were hiding. Jake's squad reached the shelter's entrance just as the Ravager Prime rounded the corner behind them. The creature moved with impossible speed for something so large. Its legs pumped like pistons, covering ground faster than any human could run. "Get the people out through the back exit," Jake ordered. "Danny, you're with me. We'll buy them time." "Sir, with respect, our weapons won't even scratch that thing," Danny said. "We don't need to hurt it. We just need to slow it down." Jake and Danny took position behind an overturned truck. They opened fire with their plasma rifles, the bright energy bolts striking the Ravager Prime's chest and head. The creature's armor absorbed the impacts without showing any damage, but the attack had the desired effect. The monster's attention focused on them instead of the fleeing civilians. The Ravager Prime charged toward their position, its claws extended, each one glowing with some kind of energy field. Jake dove to one side while Danny rolled the other. "Way!" The creature's claws sliced through the truck like it was made of paper. "Jake, look out!" Danny shouted. The Ravager Prime's massive hand swung toward Jake. He threw himself backward, but he wasn't fast enough. The creature's claws caught his combat vest, tearing through the armored material and sending him flying 20 feet through the air. Jake hit the ground hard, his rifle skittering away across the pavement. Danny stepped between Jake and the monster, his rifle firing continuously. "Come on, you ugly piece of scrap! Come and get me!" The Ravager Prime's attention shifted to Danny. Its eyes blazed with hunger as it advanced on the young soldier. Danny kept firing, backing toward a pile of construction equipment. Jake struggled to his feet, his ribs screaming in pain. "Danny, get out of there!" Jake yelled. But Danny wasn't listening. He had positioned himself next to a stack of explosive charges that the colony workers had been using for mining operations. Jake realized what his friend was planning to do. "The civilians are clear," Danny called out, still firing at the approaching monster. "Tell my mom I did good, okay?" "Danny, no!" Danny triggered the explosives. The blast lit up the street like a miniature sun. The shockwave knocked Jake to the ground again, his ears ringing from the explosion. Smoke and dust filled the air, making it impossible to see anything. When the smoke cleared, Jake staggered to his feet. The Ravager Prime stood in the center of the blast crater, completely unharmed. Its armor hadn't even been scratched. Of Danny, there was nothing left. The creature turned its 6 red eyes toward Jake. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the smoking ruins. Then the monster's head tilted slightly, as if it was studying him. Jake felt like he was being examined by some terrible intelligence that was trying to understand what humans were, and why they fought so hard. The moment passed. The Ravager Prime turned away and continued its methodical destruction of the colony. Jake fell to his knees, overwhelmed by grief and rage. His best friend had died for nothing. The monster was unstoppable,